Okay, so in my opinion, the Pokemon TCG has a nice variety of types, and within each type, there's a lot of unique archetypes and potential decks that can perform well. However, not all types are equal in the TCG. RIP fairy types, am I right? But I thought in today's video I would take a look at grass types because, to be frank, they just suck in the TCG as of late. And I mean like really bad compared to all the other types. Like even fighting types, which have been pretty grim for most of the Sword and Shield era, to be fair, have been getting a lot better, you know? Notice that with stuff like Aerodactyl V-Star and whatnot. However, grass types have consistently just been a bit meh in the TCG for a while. So in today's video, I want to just take a look at 5 key examples and basically go over why I think each of them was just a bad card, basically, and what they could have done differently to make them better. So as a disclaimer for this video, this is supposed to be general criticism at card design of Pokemon, and therefore, if you like and enjoy any of these cards/decks, that is absolutely fine. Personally, I enjoy many of these cards. I think they're really cool. I wish they were better, of course, but I still think they're really cool. I've had a lot of fun playing most of them, and the ones I haven't played, I'll get like out of the way immediately, aka Shaman V Star, which is, spoiler alert, the first card we're going to talk about. But personally, I really do enjoy these cards, and I think they are very fun. And this is obviously just my opinion. I know a lot of people think that grass types just suck in the TCG, but this, again, is just my opinion. I will use both a live ladder and tournaments for the basis of my thoughts, however, so it won't just be strictly competitive. There will be a bit of both. So, kicking things off, we've got Shaman V-Star, and yes, I did let out a sigh there because compared to most of the other V-Stars, with maybe the exception of Leafeon V-Star, which I think is an example of a Pokemon V-Star done well, Shaman V-Star is just wrong on so many levels. And the first thing we've got to talk about is that HP. 250 is absolutely pathetic. I know Alolan Vulpix V-Star, it's a mouthful, had 240, but Vulpix was also walling out other Pokemon, so its HP could be forgiven. Shaman has no excuse to be doing 250 HP. That's just really, really bad. And it's also evolving from Shaman V, which is already a low HP V Pokemon. And then you get to the actual attacks/abilities. Revenge Blast, 120, 40 more damage for each prize card your opponent's taken. In theory, not the worst attack in the world, but why do I think this attack is pretty bad? Shaman V, funnily enough, has this exact same attack, admittedly at a slightly lower damage modifier, but you just think, why did they make an attack just slightly better than the Shaman V's attacks? Just feels a bit weird, to be honest, and this isn't really doing major damage anyway until the late game. So at that point, why not just use Shaman V in the late game? You know, why bother with Shaman V Star? Like 120 is pathetic as well. Like that's not even 2-hit anything. So yeah, Revenge Blast, pretty weak. Then we have the ability Star Bloom. This is your V-Star power, by the way, so it does have to compete with stuff like Starbirth. It says, once your turn, you may heal 120 damage from each of your benched grass Pokemon. Sounds fantastic, right? And a lot of these kind of like massive heal effects sound really good in the TCG until you realize a few things. Number one is Manaphy. So if you're having to heal 120 from each of your bench Pokemon, chances are your opponent is playing a spread deck. If they're not, then this point is already void. But say they are, Manaphy just negates bench damage. Okay, but what happens if my opponent just swings into my Pokemon? I can probably just switch out. And so I have a lot of grass Pokemon in play that have all been hit at least once. So then I can heal 120 damage from each of those Pokemon and potentially put me back in the prize race to win. That sounds great in theory. One problem: boss's orders. Your opponent just plays a boss. It doesn't matter if you switch to the bench. That's why a lot of people don't bother with just switching to the bench after they've been attacked, because chances are your opponent will just boss that thing up late game and KO it for prize cards. So Star Bloom, not great. Definitely feel like Shaman V-Star could have been a lot better. Bit of a shame, really. Next up is Meowscarada. Another thing to bear in mind is these cards will be in order of when they're released. So Meowscarada EX, this is a really cool one, and a really sad one at that, because I had a lot of faith in this card, and I still do. And I do understand why a lot of people still think this deck is underrated. I do think that is understandable. The ability is really cool, and the attack can deal a lot of damage. However, a few problems with this card. The first one being the ability only targets the bench, which is surprisingly very annoying when you need to, actually attack your opponent's active Pokemon at some point in the game. So the fact that you have to set one of these up on the bench, then use the ability, hit something on the bench, then play something like an escape rope, which by the way is rotating, so that won't be an option sooner or later, does have a few problems going for it, and sadly the ability is just a wee bit too restrictive. The attack, Scratching Nails, can do 220 damage if your opponent's active is already damaged, which is decent, to be fair. It is a good attack, but at the same time, the fact that you actually need to have already damaged them to get the full effect, so it's always going to be a 2-hit KO effectively with Scratching Nails. You're never going to get a 1-hit KO on something naturally. It's always going to have to be you set them up with damage beforehand. And if you want to KO a V-Star, then you probably have to use multiple Bouquet Magics. Overall, however, where I want to be positive in this video, I would say that Meowscarada EX was actually the best of the trio. Quaxalava and Skeledirge EX were absolutely terrible from that set. Let's be honest here, they were terrible. So Meowscarada actually being the best one of the three, I think that's really cool. And I do hope Meowscarada gets better. However, I still think this card is worse than it should be, and I do think Bouquet Magic should be able to target the active Pokemon. If it could, then this card definitely would have been viable. Bit of a shame. Okay, next up, we've got Toedscruel. Now, Toedscruel was actually my favorite deck to come out of Obsidian Flames for a long time. I did play it for a while, until, like most people, realized it was bugged. And so Colony Rush was actually doing 40 more damage than it was supposed to most of the time. Which sucks, because it means I couldn't make a video on the darn thing. So yeah, Toedscruel, really annoying that it was bugged. However, this was a really fun deck. I think ultimately in the end I just copy and pasted Azul GG's list, changed around 3 or 4 cards and was like, yeah, this seems pretty good, and then went on a win streak of 7. Toedscruel was a lot of fun. However, I think this card was released as a soft counter to Charizard, is that fair? In that set? However, Toedscruel relies on a lot of energy being in play attached to each of your benched Pokemon. So effectively doing 40 more damage for each of your benched Pokemon that have a grass energy attached to them. That sounds fantastic in theory, right? You just set up a charm, you bench loads of grass Pokemon, and you just start attaching a bunch of grass energy. You don't actually need to bench grass Pokemon and attach grass energy to them, but you still need grass energy. So, bear that in mind. Overall, I think this attack is okay, but same problem as we have with Meowscarada and Shaman. You're not really doing a lot of damage straight off the bat. You do have to kind of wait a bit. You could use Fortress EX, but that kind of screws the prize trade quite terribly, because as soon as a Fortress is used, it's effectively like your opponent KOing a Toedscruel, which is not ideal. And 270 HP means that you're not actually that bulky in the grander scheme of things. At least being a stage 1, you evolve from a single prizer, which is very nice about this EX. However, overall, I would say Colony Rush is just not doing enough damage. Like, why couldn't this be 90 base or even 100 base? Like, it wouldn't have made this card broken to do a little bit more damage. And they said, no, we're just going to make Toedscruel bugged instead. So the only thing that Toedscruel got was a bug, and I think that's a big shame. But yeah, Toedscruel, just wish he did more damage. Okay, number 2, Venusaur EX. I think this card was notably worse than the Charizard and Blastoise that came out in 151. I do. I think it was notably worse. The Charizard had applications in the regular Charizard deck, even though it's not really used nowadays at all. It still had potential in that deck, and I'll give it the benefit of the doubt that it still might, given the fact it can toss out 330 damage for energy. And the Blastoise, which I still stand by my opinion that it was the best EX in that set, was the best EX in the set, and therefore a good card. And that leaves Venusaur. 340 HP is a lot, and an ability that can heal 60 from your active Pokemon. Sounds good, right? However, most Pokemon these days are doing 200 damage, minimum. Sometimes they do a bit less and get a 2 KO, like 180, 170 kind of damage. But most of the time, you've got stuff like Venusaur saying heal 60. What does heal 60 mean in the grander scheme of things? It doesn't mean a lot. It's not enough damage to be healing. And if you want to heal something else, that just means you have to get Venusaur into the active spot and then switch it out again into something else. And at that point, you're putting a stage 2 line into your deck just to heal 60. Feels a bit weak. Then we have Dangerous Toxwhip, which, to be fair, isn't the worst attack in the world. Its main issue is the fact it's for 2 grass and a colorless, because without Gardenia, let's face it, you are never paying this attack cost. 150 damage, and your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned. Admittedly, I would like to try this out with the upcoming Dangerous Jungle card, which will allow you to place 2 more damage counters instead of 1 for poison, which is quite nice. And it will actually mean that Dangerous Toxwhip can 2-hit KO stuff, which is what it should have been doing anyway. For 3 energy on a stage 2, can't even 2-hit KO most things. Yeah, that's quite scary. So, Venusaur EX, just a bit weak, to be honest. And number 1, and this is a bit dicey, even by my standards, but I think Torterra EX won't be as good as people think it will be. I'm not saying it's going to be terrible, and certainly not as bad as most of the stuff we've talked about in today's video, but I worry that Torterra EX just won't be as good as people hope it will be. So 340 HP, again, we've talked about this before, it's a lot of HP to have, but if your opponent is tossing out 200 damage a hit, then what does it really matter if this is 340 as opposed to, 280, basically? Your opponent can still 2-hit KO it at the end of the day. What this effectively means is that if you want to survive a bit longer, you'll have to use stuff like Whimsicott to heal it, but Whimsicott's also a stage 1 that doesn't draw you any cards, and only contributes to Forest March, which is a bit of a problem. So what is Forest March? 1 grass, does 30 damage for each grass Pokemon you have in play. Not great, not terrible. It's not terrible because it's actually pretty efficient damage in the early game, which is nice and something a lot of these Pokemon lack. However, you're not really doing a lot of damage, even for 1 grass energy. And it feels weird to say this, but the fact that you need a maximum belt, I believe it's called, the one that increases your damage by plus 50 to EXs, just to get a KO on a Charizard, I think, with 4 or 5 grass Pokemon in play, that doesn't feel super great. That just doesn't. Not when Charizard can, tech in an Entei and suddenly 1-hit KO you because, whoops, you have to fill your entire bench with grass Pokemon just to deal relevant damage. Feels kind of bad, to be honest. Now, you can make the argument that you also have Jungle Hammer. Does 150, heals 50. Healing 50 is quite nice. I do like that effect. However, doing 150 it's kind of bad, even for grass double turbo, and the double turbo will be, a bit of a double-edged sword because, of course, it will reduce your overall damage by minus 20. So you might as well play this with Gardenia, but Gardenia is pretty terrible anyway, so maybe not. Still, I'm a bit concerned that Torterra isn't quite doing it. I hope that it is, but part of me is very nervous about Torterra EX actually being that good. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I really want this card to be good. But I'm scared. I'm just scared at this point because so many grass Pokemon have been terrible. I really believed in Meowscarada, and look what happened. Bit of a tragedy. However, the future is bright. We do have some upcoming cards that do look to be good. Skovalian, although it's mainly a control-focused deck, which some people don't like, but it will give you an excuse to play Crushing Hammers again if you really miss them. So Skovalian, I think, will actually be pretty good. Iron Leaves EX, which I know is kind of cheating because, let's face it, you're playing Iron Leaves as a tech card. It's not a grass deck. It's a future box deck with 2 or 3 Iron Leaves in, 3 tops. So maybe Iron Leaves kind of counts as being a good grass Pokemon card, but it is a tech option. So at the end of the day, I'm not super happy about that. But, it's cool that it's a grass Pokemon that's playable, basically. Also, we have Urgrupon to look forward to in Twilight Masquerade. We don't know what this card does. We actually won't know for another month, I think, at the very least. So it is a while away before we see this grass card. I seriously hope it's good, it's playable, and it's not trash. I really hope Ogerpon is good. So many people want Ogerpon to be good. I hope it's good. Please, please, Pokemon, just give us a good grass card. Yeah, I do believe in Torterra to some degree, but I'm scared. I'm scared of Torterra flopping. If anything, Scorvalion might actually be the best grass type card that would get in standard. But yeah, this has been our power. Thank you for watching.